Hey guys, it's AxiomaticUncertainty here, and today I'm going to be back with the 5th video in the tutorial series on Unity car physics. So what we're going to be doing today is just handling our brake lights, our braking system, etc., etc. Just the basics of getting all of the braking physics set up with our car, on a more rudimentary level, I suppose, and just getting everything functional. So to start this out, I think we're just going to head into our script. So we're going to open up our car controller, right? And actually, if I just demonstrate this really quickly, I'm going to make this video as short as possible. Right now, our car can only be stopped by using the back keys. And obviously, if you can see it, it's not very realistic the way that it's acting. That is, you can see that's not really how a braking vehicle looks. And, the differences aren't too bad, but, I don't like it that way. So what we're going to be doing here is just first starting out by stubbing some more stuff in our script. So here we're going to add a new value. We're going to call this our public bool break, right? And the reason for our using this input manager is that now this class is extendable, and we can set it up with different controller values, so we can change, what keys correspond to what actual functions in this thing without, making our car controller extremely convoluted or, just messy. So we can make our break equal to our input.get key, right? And actually, I'll put this into its own block since it's a get key. And we'll call this break equals input.get key. Oops, sorry about that. .get key. Key code dot break, or sorry, oh my gosh, okay, dot space, since we're using the space key as our break. And I like that. So now we can just head into our car controller and get a reference to this. So if we want, we can come into here and we can say if, and actually, okay, this is going to go in our fixed update because this is a physics function, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to run this inside of our throttle wheels section, right? Because obviously all of the wheels that are throttleable also must be controllable on the level of, basic braking and, manipulation by the driver of the car. So we need to put an if statement in here. We're going to just say if im.brake. And now we can come in here and we can just write our script out. And actually, let's add an else. Okay. So if this isn't true, we're going to do this first. We need to figure out what we're going to do. So usually our car's motor torque is just going to be out here, right? But we actually want this inside, because if we're braking, we don't want to be setting this motor torque at all on the outside, right? So I'm gonna move that in, and actually, sorry, that's gonna go down here, and there we go. So there's that now. But then we also need to add some other stuff. So the system for motor, or for braking, is called brake torque, right? And it's the same way, right? It's a non-invocable method. We're gonna have, it's non-invocable, sorry, and we're gonna have to just set the value of this brake torque. So it's a set get, and we can make this brake torque 0f, because obviously if we're driving forward, we don't want to be braking. And then the reverse will be true here. So in here, we're going to conversely have, we're going to have our motor torque at 0f, right? And we're going to have our wheel dot brake torque at some value here. We're going to say, for the sake of modularity and controllability, we're going to make this a value. We're going to say brake co, or brake strength. Sure. This needs a type. We're going to call this a float. Whoops, I hit the insert key. So public brake strength is going to be this, right? And now we can come back down into this section and just make this our brake strength. And now that should function just fine. And we can come back into our car, make some changes here. So if we come back in, we can see that there is now a brake strength option. We'll make this like 200 since this is a torque. And if we now just sort of run this, right, you can see our car stops, but it stops instantly, right? And you may be wondering, why is this happening? Why this isn't at all realistic? What are you doing? Why did you do this? This doesn't seem to be working. But we will get to that in a second. First, though, I would just like to multiply in a time.delta time on this, just because I believe if you make it 200, right, the time.delta time essentially accounts for changes in frame rate, right? And so if we're on a faster computer, our frame rate's going to be higher, so we need to multiply in this time.delta time in order to make these computations smaller so that, we can consistently move the same distance in a second, right? So if we're moving, 300 frames per second and we don't multiply in time.delta time, we're going to end up moving an object, if we select one, 300 units per second, 1 per frame. And if we do that on a slower computer, say, 60 frames per second, we're going to end up running, 1/5 of the distance in a frame. So we need to multiply that in for the sake of consistency, just to make this game run smoothly on all devices and platforms. So we multiply that in, and we now have our brake torque set up perfectly. And so now you may be wondering, why does the car stop instantly? Well, we're going to fix that right now. And what the issue is that our wheels actually can't. Let me just find one of our wheels. We don't need that. Our wheels can't process or can't do that right now because our extremium slip value and our asymptote slip value so both of those values, right, are so low that the car cannot, really move, because the brake torque is essentially going to just stop these wheels from turning within a frame or two, And so once that happens, you're going to be unable to slide forward, or you're going to be unable to turn the wheels. Since these values are so low, though, the car won't slip at all because the friction is too much. And so it will just stop in its place, and that's why we're getting that weird effect. So we're going to make this like 6, right? And, just for the sake of laziness, we can just copy this component value, and we can just paste that into each of these, right? So we can paste the component values, and just paste it again, and then just paste it one more time. And now if we run it, we should see an improvement to this. I'm not sure if it's going to be perfect, right? That's a bit odd. Don't really know what's going on with that. Let's just decrease the stiffness here, right? This will be easier than just copying it this time around, right? And now if we just make sure it's saved and run it, hopefully we get some improvement. There you go. So you can see it's now a smooth motion, right? We're slowing to a stop, and we can change the value for the strength coefficient at some point. And we're also going to tweak these wheels because obviously you can see the suspension distance is a bit high. But, other than that, I think that that's a pretty good setup. I like it. I like it a lot. Let's just make this more like 300. And now we should see some major improvements to the rate at which that slowing is occurring. Right, so not ideal. I think that it should be a bit larger. And just exit that. Say 400. Right? And we can just press down on the brake, and we can stop the car. And I'd say that that's a decent stopping distance, but obviously we're going to change that as well later. And there you go. So that would be the first step of our brakes. Now we're going to do one more thing, and then I'm going to cut the video off. And that is going to be just making these brakes light up, right? So obviously a car has brake lights. But the thing is that these lights here, if you look at them, are actually opaque, right? You can see that these are just little stickers, right? And so this isn't necessarily going to work with our project in the way that you'd usually want it to. Obviously, this isn't like a glass material, and so it's not going to refract any of the light or reflect anything. And therefore, you're not going to end up with that nice, glowing effect that you get out of a, tail light. And so I did some experimentation with the material, and I found some values that work quite nicely for the emission value. And what I'm going to get to in a second is the fact that this Tocus light here, they spelled light wrong for some reason, is actually something that we can change here. So if we make this like a bit brighter, you can see that they look kind of crappy, right? They do, they really do. But if we just make them just right, they don't look that bad from a distance, right? And so then if I run the game, you can see that it looks like an acceptable brake light. It looks sort of like it's been lit up, and so we can now go back into our code, and I'll just undo these changes, right? And we can make some modifications here to our scene. And so if I go into our code, obviously this is going to go in the update section. I can get this whole thing set up, right? So we don't need that if statement. We can use a ternary operator once more. And actually, what we need to do is we just need to set up a trigger. So actually, I don't really want to use the ternary operator. Instead, I am going to just do if input get key key code dot key code dot space, right? And this is going to be a bit awkward because I want to build up some modularity here, as I already said, and so I want these classes to all be extendable and fully modifiable. So we're going to make this a public virtual void. We're going to call this toggle tail lights, right? Oops. Tail lights like that, and in here we're going to have another for each, and we're going to make this a new list. I'm going to call this our public list. Actually, game object. Oops. Tail lights. Right? And that's going to be just fine. Obviously, this will, suffice here. And now we can add our taillights to this statement. So we can say for game object TL in tail lights. And then what we can do is we can just modify some stuff in here. So what we need to change is actually we need to go into our taillight. We need to say tl.get component, and we need to get our renderer, right? Because, sorry about that, our renderer. And the reason for that is that if we look at our code, right, you can see that this is controlled by our rendering, right? You get the rendering mode, right? This is a shader, and the shading is controlled by the rendering, right? If I turn off the mesh renderer, this is no longer going to shade either. So it's a component of the rendering, and therefore we need to go under this larger class of the renderer, and then from here we can do .material and grab the material for the vehicle. And now we can check out something else here, which is that we can now use this other option, set color, right? And what set color will allow us to do is we can select a parameter, right, just like that, and then we can put in a color value. And, for our parameter, we're going to have a parameter which you can find online or basically anywhere that you really want to. There's actually an option, which I'll show you at some other point in a different video, in the menu where you can change this, or where you can find stuff like this. But this is going to be this key here, right? And you need to type this, case by case, right? Letter by letter. It's case sensitive, and this will just allow you to change the emissivity of the object. And so now what we can do is we can make this a ternary Actually, darn it. I don't like this. I'm going to change this a little bit, right? What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to remove this from here, because actually I don't think that this is one case. I don't think that this is a case where we need this in here. So I'm going to copy this whole bit of code, right? We can just remove this, and we're going to remove this, and I'm going to move nice and quickly so that I don't bog you guys down with too long a tutorial, right? As you remember, or if you may remember, last tutorial was pretty long. So I'm just going to come in here, so I'm going to say public, list, right? And this is going to contain game objects, right? And we're going to call this our tail lights. And then we can go back into our update. We can put in here this bit, right? And so we're going to go through each of these if the spacebar is pressed down. And actually we can just remove this too, right? And I'll explain all of this in a second. So I don't really remember what the quick little shortcut is for this bit here that I'm trying to do here, just backspacing all this stuff without deleting it. But anyhow, this is going to give us everything that we need here, right? Hit Shift Tab. Okay, so that's what I thought. So what we can do here is we can then add in a ternary operation here. And this is how I'd imagine at the beginning. I'm not sure why I put in this toggle taillights thing. It's kind of useless. Obviously, it's a bit frivolous for us to have something like that if we're going to be running this code, in one line. If we don't use this extended lighting manager thing, I think that's just making it unnecessarily complicated. So we're not going to complicate things. Instead, we're going to work on just using some smart code instead of, just dragging out the same thing over and over. Right, so what we're going to do here is we can say then im.break, and we can get our break key, and then we can say question mark, right, indicating that this is our statement. And then we can put in here two things. So we can say one, a new color, and this is where the color that I found comes in. And the parameters that I used were 0.5, so 0.5 f in this case since it's a float, and we need to sign it as such, and then 0.111 f, and then another 0.111 f, and I'm just reading those off my whiteboard over there. So, I apologize for having to lean away from the microphone for a second in order to look. The whiteboard is by the door, and I am not. So now we can get a new color, and we can call this a color.black, and this is just the default 000 color essentially. And now this should work perfectly for our lights, and that ternary operator is basically just going to hinge on the spacebar being pressed. So if it's pressed, these lights are going to be off. If it's not, they're going to be on, right? And it's not working quite yet. Yes. Okay. So what we did wrong here, right? Or not wrong necessarily, what we forgot to do here is we had to add this. So we had to add our lights to this game object. We're going to go into our back left light and our back right. Our back right light. And just add each, and then save it, play the game, and you can see our camera is working. And now if we press it, we have some working tail lights, right? And so as our car stops and starts, that all works out perfectly. And obviously these aren't, beautiful looking or anything, but this is mostly to demonstrate the concept. We'll try to get into some more artistic stuff later on. And, if this course keeps going, and I am really enjoying this, I may buy like an actual asset since I suck at modeling, and we'll do something with some more complex stuff. So, as usual, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And then if you have a question, please comment. I will reach out to you within a day or so, maybe even less. Sometimes it's been, less than an hour if I'm on my phone or, if I'm at my computer. And so, again, I will make sure to try to contact you. I'll make sure to try to address your issues. And, if you're enjoying the videos, again, remember to do that. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, and also comment with suggestions, feedback, etc., questions, anything that you have, concerns, whatever. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Next video is going to be, well, I'm not really sure what it's going to be. Maybe the smooth camera following, but that's a bit simple. So, we could do that, and then some other nice stuff, like maybe switching camera angles and things like that. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial. I'm going to cut it off here. Obviously, we reached the 20-minute mark again. I apologize. These videos are not supposed to be as long as they are, but I like to, actually explain a lot of this stuff in detail and in depth. So yeah, as always, I hope that you've enjoyed this, and bye.